a lot, which is good, because there are a lot of patriots that have come to, the cream has come to the top of the barrel in the last several years. We've kind of seen that there are people who actually know the Constitution, and more you get people that don't just tell you history, they just enlighten you and make you want to go back and get involved and, just light your fire again. Dwayne Stoval is one of those people because he came and spoke to us, I think, the first year after we formed.
It's been a couple, 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah, one of the first speakers, and he was very, everybody enjoyed you. So we've been waiting to get him to come back. And he was running for office, and somebody that we really like a lot, candidate, kind of wet the fire, and so he got out of the race he was in, which actually in some ways might be good for us, because then we were able to get him back again. So Dwayne is going to come and talk to us tonight about discuss how to write it.
And I've got judges here.
Oh,
That's a good thing.
Yes, that's a good thing.
Hey, do I need a microphone, or are y'all good? Because if you can hear me,
I don't think you.
otherwise I'm going to be in the way, and
Yeah.
I can get really loud.
Can you cut that one? Because it.
We good with this?
If that suits you, just tip me on the desk, Dwayne.
Okay.
Oh, here.
Start me up.
Are you going to walk around a lot? You can.
Not possible.
You do whatever you want. I'm just.
Okay. I'm here representing an organization I started a couple of years ago called Get Off My State. When I was here last time, I think we called it a Keep Texas Free presentation. I have been asked to go abroad and do these, meaning like Alabama and San Jose, California, and
So you
Seattle,
don't go
Washington. So,
like France or Germany or something, but you mean.
hey, when you leave Texas, you're going abroad. I don't know. So it's formally Get Off My State. That's the way it's going to stay, because everything I talk about fits with every state you go to, but it allows me to get out and not have to re-explain everything about being from Texas and us trying to focus on Texas. We're going to spread this message as far as we can. Tonight we're going to talk a lot about the Supreme Court. We're going to talk a lot about your congressman. And when you leave here tonight, you will know, I promise you, I've talked to a large portion of our Texas congressional delegation. Tonight you will know way more than the majority of your congressional delegation in Texas on what their role is and what the authorities they actually have are. I start this out with the same message no matter which presentation I'm doing, because this is the most simple part of it, but people seem to forget it and they go the other direction within a week. Question: do we live in the United States of America in the free and independent state of Texas? Yes or no?
Yes.
We're going to cut that mic off.
Yeah, please.
Do we?
No, I think it's fine.
I'm going to rephrase the question. Rethink about it. See if you've ever heard this before. Or do we live in the United States, singular, in the county of Texas?
No.
Think about that. That is actually the relationship we have today.
Yes, it is.
There's no other way to describe it. There's not a state in the union that's free and independent. No state manages its own affairs. It just doesn't happen. We have a monolithic, large state with a singular government that manages the states. Let's just speak truth to power. I'm not pulling anybody's leg here. This is where we're at. There are 3 principles that the Constitution was based on. And if you understand these 3 principles, I don't care if you're a 6th grade reading level who dropped out of school, it doesn't matter. If you understand these basic principles, you can make a smart decision on voting. You can decide for yourself whether or not the legislation they are passing is correct, whether you support what the government is doing. These are the basic principles. If you know these, you're good to go governmental-wise in this country. You're supposed to be. That Constitution was based on these 3 principles. Limited government, okay? Limited government, very simple. Some of you were here the last time I was here. Remember, it's interchangeable with liberty. Basically, the smaller a government is, the more free the people, right? Never been a society in history where the government got so large that people were so much more free. It just doesn't work that way, right? Very simple concept. The second principle is republicanism. Anybody know what the system of republicanism is? What that is? That's actually our electoral process. We were supposed to live with a republican form of government, meaning republicanism is that system in which we will be represented by those we elect. All right? The difference between what was framed in Philadelphia and agreed to by the states and what we live with today is that in Philadelphia they labored over what the ratio would be, and a lot of what we talk about tonight is going to have to do with scale. You probably never talk about scale at the dinner table. Republics only survive if they're in scale. We are woefully out of scale in this country. Woefully. We're going to talk about that right now. The framers, if you read your Constitution, everybody's seen the original formula. It was around 30,000 citizens to the representative. Everybody's read that in the Constitution? Nobody pays attention to it. Well, there was a reason for that. They labored over it. Some wanted 10,000, some wanted 50,000. They argued back and forth. They came up with 30,000. The principle behind that was that in a community of around 30,000 people or so, there was a very high likelihood you would know the person you were voting for personally. And a really high likelihood that even if you didn't know them, you would know someone that knew that person personally. And you would have what we have zero of today, context of character. We have no context of character. Early 20th century, around 1910, going forward to 1926 or 7, the sitting Congress was dealing with something that we in Texas know all about, redistricting, right? Back then, the only time you could expand the number of representatives in the House was through 10-year census or incoming states for the change in population, correct? So, around that period in time, there were a number of congressmen who were a little concerned because there was going to be a new census with a big change in population. They may get, challengers. They may get in a position where they can't get reelected. And they decided among themselves that 435 is just plenty. We don't need any more. And they locked themselves in. And they did a representative act around 1926 or 7 that secured it. And that's where we are today. So, from that moment forward, what has happened to republicanism? It has disappeared. Why is that? Because from the moment they made that decision, they were sitting at 30,000 or so to 1 in a ratio of representation between one member of the House and their district. What happened to today? That 435 number stayed the same, right? Well, now, we're over 320 million, give or take, in the United States. We've got somewhere in the neighborhood of 800,000 or so of us to one person in Congress, in the House. One. There is no possible way that they can know each and every member of their district. There is no possible way that even a simple majority of their district could know them personally. It is impossible. So, when we say, how is it possible that you have a House of Representatives that has a 9% approval rating, and we elect 95% of these idiots every single time we go to the ballot box? How is that possible? It is because the vast majority of us, not the group in this room, the vast majority of us, 50,000 people for every person that's in this room, don't have a clue who they are. Don't care who they are. All they get is a multi-million-dollar marketing campaign every few years that comes on in their face every single time they get in the car, every time they turn on the TV, and it says, I don't know, what's Cornyn's favorite line? I'm conservative, just like you. Right? Yeah. And what do we get? We get re-elected people who do nothing to support our principles. Nothing. But we think we're represented because we're raised from this high all the way up to say we live in the freest country in the world and we are in a representative government. I'm represented. No, you're not. You're not even close. You think you are. You hallucinate that you are. We have this structure of a government where you're supposed to be represented. Guess what? It's a joke. You're not represented, and it's on us. There is a finite group of people. This is the issue. What happens with 435 people who are now representing 800,000 people apiece? Where did all the power go? If I represent this room, you all can see me, you all can point me out. If I behave poorly, you can all corner me in the corner and say, you're no longer doing this anymore. Who has the power? You do. If there's 800,000 people in a coliseum and one guy represents them all, who sees his bad behavior? Nobody. Not enough to remove him. This is where we're at. I said federalism for last because it's the most important part of our system. Federalism is the system of government in which the states, who created the new government by accepting the agreement, which is the Constitution, the states would have expansive authority. Expansive. The federal government have those finite authorities that the states gave it, and that's it. So I use this picture because this young lady represents the union. She represents the states. The dog represents the newly formed government. It's on a leash. It's looking to her for guidance. She's got her eye on it. This is how it's supposed to work. The federal system in which the states manage their own affairs, save those few little finite authorities they gave the federal. This is not federalism. But this is what we have today. That dog is now the 10,000-pound bulldog in your living room. We are not in control of the federal government. It is no longer federal. I don't go to the Federalist Papers very often because I've read enough over the last 10 years of my life to come to the conclusion that the Federalist Papers didn't really mean that much. People love to quote them. I quote this because this is James Madison's words and he describes federalism. This is Federalist 49, by the way. He says, the powers delegated to the proposed Constitution, by the proposed Constitution to the federal government are few and defined. I don't think you can get more simple than that. Few and defined. Those which are to remain in the state governments are numerous and indefinite. Don't think you can get more simple than that either. Indefinite and defined are very clear distinctions, wouldn't you say? Would you say there is a limit on anything the federal government can do to that?
No.
No.
They don't think there is.
We don't
away
either.
with it.
Yeah, they get away with it.
I left this in here. I talked to a lot of students. I get a kick out of using the term free market because politicians as a whole, it's just a running joke for me. If you get an elder statesman who's been in, they're generally not statesmen, but an elder politician who's been in the office for 30 years, and they go and talk and they use the term free market,
Kevin Brady.
they feel like they're getting brownie points with the young folks, you know, that free market talk. The problem is they don't know anything about free markets. They think free markets are only when the government controls them a certain way, and that's what makes it a free market. That's a whole different story. Federalism, where the states have expansive authority, always leads to one answer from somebody. If I'm talking to a group that maybe has some Democrats in it, or you know, maybe some liberal progressive Republicans, which we have a lot of, they'll automatically say, so you're saying a state can write laws that oppress me, that hurt my liberty? And in simple terms, yes. That was the point. Well, they can't do that. Well, no. You want each state to be able to write its own laws and manage its own affairs. And they wanted that in Philadelphia as well. And why is that? Because if in a state, anywhere, the people were to enact and implement laws that did injury to your liberty, what would the people do?
Vote.
They'd go somewhere else that was more free and more aligned with their ideology, right? What happens when you have a monolithic state with a monarchical style government that has a king, because we're voting on a king. I don't know if you all figured that out yet or not. What happens? Where do you go when they write laws that say you will subsidize the murder of unborn children? We don't care where you live, you will recognize Adam marrying Steve as marriage. Where do you go? Think about that. Yes, this Constitution created a federal government with limited power. What we live under today is a national government with unlimited power. This is not a federal government anymore, it's a national government. capital N, national. Everyone in this room has been nationalized. You know why? Because we're about 6 generations into the education of being nationalized. We are all raised, back here again, it starts here. And we've all raised our own children. I'm guilty of it too. We raise our children to give our undying loyalty to this government. We say our pledge of allegiance to the flag. We all talk about what we're doing. We're in Syria. We're in Libya. Well, you know, we're bombing. I don't say that anymore. I'm not doing squat. I got a family full of Marine Corps, and they'll tell you the same thing. We're not doing anything but following orders. These people are doing things with money they steal from us against our will. Doing things that we don't give our consent to. This is the country we live in today. Okay? The issue is they have no limits whatsoever, and we have been raised to believe that what they do is proper because they are who they are. We have elected them. We have a Supreme Court today that has 0 limits. But by the Constitution, it's one of the most limited things you could possibly be a member of. No one gets that. Nobody in here has a child or a grandchild that gets that. Nationalism is when all power is held by the central government, with the states being utilized as subordinate administrators. Back to the county situation, okay? States like to pretend that they are free and independent, that they've got states' rights, right? We got states' rights. I have people get on me all the time. Many of you in here didn't know I ran against John Cornyn in 2014. I pulled 11% of the state of Texas on $70,000. Didn't think that was impressive then. The day after, when my phone started ringing, I realized I must have done something that was pretty good. It was an anomaly. 70 grand, 11% of this state, pretty awesome. I'm very proud of that.
Yeah.
The fact is, we have people come after me all the time and they say, we need you in the State House. We need you in the State House. Quit running for a federal office. Well, I look at it this way. I don't really want to go fight with the other inmates over who's going to control the prison yard. I'd much rather find the warden and punch him in the mouth. That's me. Maybe it's a little rough around the edges, but I kind of come that way. How did this happen? Why did it happen? I'm going to give you all a quick rundown of how it happened, and then we're going to jump into how it can be stopped. Can it be stopped is a different question, and I can't answer that for everybody. And I think everybody in here, in your heart of hearts, knows that we're in a decline, and we don't know if 320 million people in this country, I don't know if we're going to get enough of them to come around to this before it corrects itself, however that works out. Thomas Jefferson nailed it. He said the Constitution on this hypothesis is a mere thing of wax in the hands of the judiciary, which they may twist and shape in any form they please. He nailed it. Interesting, coming from a guy who was not in Philadelphia, was not in the state ratification debates, was not a member of the first Congress. This is his appraisal after a little time had passed after they had implemented the Constitution. He read it and said, the judiciary is going to kill you. And guess what? The judiciary. These folks, judges, not Texas judges, federal judges, are kicking our teeth in every single day. When you have 3.8 million Oklahomans that have over 75% of the voting electorate in that state approve a properly executed amendment to their state constitution to say they want to recognize marriages between one man and one woman, and a single lifetime appointed federal judge overrules the will of that many millions of people in their state, folks, we got problems. Large, large problems. But it happened. And guess what? Texas is in the same boat. So are about 30 other states. This is not a laughing matter. The problem is that we have been raised this big, all the way up, to say the Supreme Court is the final arbiter of all things all the time, everywhere. And that is the biggest lie we've ever taught ourselves or our children, ever. Okay? Very short, we're not going to get into this very deep. I could spend the next 2 hours talking about this. I'm just going to tell you up front, the Bill of Rights in the federal Constitution has been the primary weapon by the federal judiciary. Why is that? It's because the federal Bill of Rights was never intended to apply to the states. Ever. Ever. It upsets me greatly that when we're having a D now at our church and I have 15 students staying at my home and they're 15 and 16 years old and I get an opportunity to ask them, so what's in the Bill of Rights? They'll say freedom of speech, Second Amendment, right? Okay, what's in your state Bill of Rights? We've got a state Bill of Rights? These kids are in high school. Yes, there's 50 different states with 50 different constitutions. And guess what? There's 50 different Bills of Rights. The federal Constitution, that structure, yeah, that's the limits on the federal government. Yeah, that federal Bill of Rights was requested by the majority of the states that approved that Constitution based on them getting a Bill of Rights that would put further constraints on that new government. It had nothing to do with the states. That is a progressive era. It actually started about 1910, where a judge, federal judge on the Supreme Court, arbitrarily reached out of thin air and said, you know what, the 14th Amendment, which gave newly freed slaves rights of citizenship, gave us the right to apply the First Amendment to the states. It didn't, but they just yanked it out of thin air. What started about the same time? We all refer to it as case precedent. So, fast forward, there's nothing in the Bill of Rights that they can't apply to the states right now. So, I'm going to segue and give you one little example of what I'm talking about to try and give you context. Everybody in here understands the Second Amendment. We all do. We're Texans. By God, we got a gun, right? I'm a concealed carry. I wish I didn't have to have a permit for it, but the fact is, we do. As of late, and I'm talking about the last 15 years of our lives, there's been a lawsuit that was settled, and it was handled in federal courts. That should have never been handled in federal courts, but it's changed our lives for the worse, and we don't even see it coming yet. McDonald v. Chicago. You know the case I'm talking about? A man named Oscar McDonald, older black gentleman in Chicago, wanted to have a pistol in his home for security. That was it. Nobody broke the law. Nobody stole a car. There wasn't any kind of criminal activity. He wanted to have a gun in his home for security. Chicago had banned guns. So they said you can't have it. It went through the Illinois judiciary, got to the Illinois Supreme Court, and the Illinois Supreme Court ruled how?
Can't have it.
No.
No, when he could.
Oh yeah, the Illinois Supreme Court said, Mr. McDonald, we're sorry, but the people of Chicago have spoken, and they don't want to have guns. Now he could have moved. He could have went to Oklahoma or Texas or a different part of Illinois, but he didn't do that. You know why? Because these fantastic groups that I'll no longer give money to, like the NRA, who are big nationalist groups, who just want to manage everybody, all 320 million people, who spend all their lobby money in the D.C., where the Second Amendment is supposed to only restrict the federal government. Well, they get involved, so does every other gun rights group in the country, every conservative group. They all get involved. They say, you can't stop that because we're all trained to believe the Second Amendment applies to us. Right? So they push it out into the federal judiciary. It gets into the federal judges' chambers. And they say, what kind of case is it? Guns? Yeah, we're really not supposed to look at that, but whatever, we'll look at it. And they take it up. Well, just 3 years ago they ruled. It's been 4 years now. Now the federal judges ruled. What did they say? They came out and said, no, 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 no. Case precedent. The 14th Amendment gives us the right to incorporate. By the way, that's called incorporation doctrine. If you want to go look it up yourself. It allows us to apply, incorporate the Second Amendment into the states, against the states. So the Second Amendment protects that man's right to have a gun. So what do conservatives do everywhere? Yes. Yes. Yeah. Now, what actually just happened?
We lost rights.
We just gave him power over the Second Amendment to apply it to us. So 25 years from now, because just in case y'all are wondering, somebody tell me where in the history of any country, any society, has politics, the body politic, ever moved right? Does it ever move more conservative? No. So, that in mind, 25 years from now, when our great-great-grandkids are getting up one day and there's a brand new set of judges who are even more progressive than these are, wakes up and says, you know, we're so much smarter than they were back then, and you're so lucky to have us. And guns are so dangerous, we're just going to allow legislation that bans guns nationally. And those kids are going to say, you can't do that. And they're going to say, yes, we can. Your grandparents gave us the sanction. Remember McDonald v. Chicago? That's how this works. That's the path we're on, because we keep giving up more and more authority to this finite group of Harvard and Yale grads in robes. So if you really want to feel like you're not represented, think about that for a second. How many people in this entire country have graduated from Harvard and Yale Law School? Fraction, a minuscule fraction. How many on the Supreme Court have graduated from Harvard and Yale Law School? 100%. Pretty tight click. I'm not sure they're really connecting with people living in Montgomery County. Got it? But you know, they're our overlords. So they use the Bill of Rights and we end up here. Try placing the name of God in a public building, make it a crime to burn in Texas a U.S. flag, recognize marriage as one man and one woman, decide pornography is not art, criminalize abortion as a choice of birth control, decide not to pay for the education of illegal aliens, require persons to show proof of citizenship, and yes, manage the bearing of arms as they see fit. If a state which has all these authorities and many, many more decides to take a stand, what happens? They get sued. And where do they go to lose? Supreme Court. Because the Supreme Court has devolved into a singular job duty. It does one thing. It gives constitutional and legitimacy, it gives constitutionality and legitimacy to completely unconstitutional and illegitimate acts of national government. No, no, no. We're saying it's okay. You just run along with states. No, no, no. We'll tell you whether or not you can put God on a plaque in your courtroom. Understand? This is how far we've come. And we all buy into it. Everybody in here is agreeing with me. But trust me, if we walk out the door today, you'll get up in the morning, you'll see somebody in California is trying to pass a law to do something you don't like, and you will get viscerally ill because they can't do that. Government, go get them. Because we're nationalized. Nationalism is a cancer on a republic, folks. When you have a shooting in Newtown, Connecticut, and it kills little children who are helpless, okay? Awful. Most evil you could ever have put on children anytime, anywhere. We should feel terrible about that, and we do. But we are literally closer to Mexico City than we are to Newtown, Connecticut. We are citizens of Texas. We don't like that kind of behavior or that kind of result or that evil being displayed anywhere on planet Earth, but the fact is it happened there, and it is none of our business. That is for the people of Connecticut to deal with the way they see fit, not for us to implement our will on them. Horrible? Yes. Compassionate? Yes. Involve ourselves in how they manage it? No. Be upset about how they do it? No. Why is that? Nationalism is awful. We are in stage 4 nationalism. I'm going to give you 2 different accounts. One actually happened, and I'm going to give you an example of what you think would have been better. Everybody remembers Wendy Davis, right? Mm-hmm. The big abortion debacle at our Capitol in Austin. She's going to have her filibuster, right? We're going to be fighting tooth and nail to get a big, pro-choice bill through that allows us to murder babies in the womb up to 5 months, and we're going to pat ourselves on the back that we really did something for our conservative values, which is a crock, by the way. But that said, When that day came, what happened? A couple of buses showed up at the state capitol. Everybody remember that?
Mm-hmm.
With a whole bunch of people carrying jars of feces and urine. They're going to throw on the people doing the work with the Texans, right? Where were they from? Folks, they weren't from Tarrant County. Michigan, New York,
Chicago.
right?
Chicago,
So,
California.
the whole perspective in this, we're all in one big community, right? We got to treat the people in another state like they live in the next door neighbor, right? Because we're all nationalized. We're American first. That even makes me want to throw up when I say that. I'm just telling you that. I'm a Texan first. Bar none. Understand what I'm saying? You ever hear me talking anywhere? If I say nation, I am talking about Texas. All right, enough of that. These people come in from out of state. What happens? Who was the lieutenant governor at that time?
Dewhurst.
Dewhurst. Dewhurst meets him at the curb of the Capitol, and it's welcome arms. It's an open Capitol, free to the people, freedom of speech. All this going on. They're in the Capitol raising moral Cain in there, screaming the worst possible thing you could scream, totally disrupting the business of Texans. Right? He gets interviewed. It's a free country, freedom of speech, yada yada, totally nationalized. Nobody even catches him on it. They just go, man, wish there was something we could do. Can't stand this behavior, right? I'm going to tell you what, if you had, be it David Dewhurst or anybody else in that government who understood the construct of this Constitution and understood the authority in the state, understood how this is supposed to work, can you imagine the discourse nationally if we'd had one representative who ended up at that front of that bus and said, oh, hang on a second, if you're here to visit, we're doing business right now, so y'all can go on down to the Alamo and take pictures, right? But if you're here to disrupt the business of Texans, we're going to have to arrest you. But luckily, I've got some of my DPS finest here, so we'll just give you an escort all the way back to Texarkana, and y'all can go home on your own. Otherwise, we're going to lock you up. That would have changed everything. Not only would it have changed everything, there's nothing they could do about it. Nothing. But we don't think like that because they're from Michigan. That's just right down the street. Right? They're our neighbors. They're over in that county. Right? Couldn't be more wrong. We're going to get off the judges for just a minute because everybody understands that this we're taught some real basic fundamental things, fundamental wrongs most of the time, but this is a government that has 3 branches, right? We all learned this in elementary school. We've got 3 branches, and they teach all our kids and us that they are Okay. I want everybody to understand, they are so not co-equal. Okay? That is the worst possible thing they can teach our kids.